going to call to order the Children's Trust meeting of April the 12th. I want to thank everybody for being here. It's nice to see some faces that I hadn't seen in person for a while. So, welcome. I guess everybody's getting a shot. Understand a couple got shots today.
I got my shot today.
Okay, so at this point, I will do my required reading. If you are listening or watching the meeting through the webinar format, please use the raise your hand function. Simply click on the participants icons in the Zoom toolbar and look for the raise your hand button at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Those of you viewing the meeting through the webinar may also comment via the chat function. If you're watching via YouTube or listening on the phone and would like to comment, please call the call-in number at 1-346-248-7799. That's 1-346-248-7799. Use the meeting ID 828-8899-1588. That's 828-8899-1588, and press the *9 to raise your hand. I would suggest that the audience call in now, even if your comments are for later in the meeting. That way you simply can raise your hand at the appropriate time. If you would like to ask the staff to display call-in information on the screen at this time. Oh, I would like to ask staff to please. Anybody got some big controversy? At the previous meeting, we passed a motion to allow board members to participate virtually so long as we had a quorum physically present, which we do, due to the extraordinary circumstances of COVID-19. The clerk will now do the roll call and verify that we have at least 6 members of the trust that are physically present for today's meeting. Who's the clerk? Would that be okay? Okay.
Member Certain. Here. Member Paul Smith.
Here.
Member Cornell.
Here.
Member Hart. Here. Member Lavoda. Here. Member Simon. Here. Member Snyder. Here. Member Schwamley.
Here.
Member Wolf-Muller. Here. And Chair Taylor.
Here. We now move on to the approval of the agenda, including any revisions. Any member of the trust may ask that an item be moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. Consent agenda items will not be discussed unless moved to the regular agenda. Are there any revisions to the agenda other than the ones that we have to bring up? Anybody from the board want to change anything? Okay. The executive calendar, there's one correction that we did point out.
Yeah, page 62, there's a missing 0 in the item. If you go to page 62, should say in the requested action 188,000, not the fictitious number with the floating column in the wrong spot there. And Mr. Chair, I'd also like to ask that we move the programs report to immediately after the chairman's report. We have some people that may have to leave early, and so we want to make sure we get all the important business in first.
Okay. Any other revisions? Not, do we have a motion? Second? Second? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I have one more thing to point out as part of the consent agenda.
Okay.
I forgot it was on consent. Item 9, the budget amendment. The resolution that everyone should have at their seat will be part of that item. Just to
Okay.
FYI.
All right. Okay, so when somebody with the motion include that, y'all good with that?
Yes.
Are there any public comments before we vote? I'm supposed to wait a minute. Anybody who would like to make a public comment? All right, and clerk, would you mind doing the roll call?
Member Dickinson.
Yes.
Member Lavoda. Yes. Member Certain. Yes. Member Paul Smith.
Here.
Member Cornell.
Yes.
Member Hart.
Yes.
Member Simon. Yes. Member Snyder.
Yes.
Member Schwamley.
Yeah.
Member Wolf-Muller. Yes.
Okay, motion is unanimous. We have, two items that I'm supposed to bring up, one of which is the, board attendance, which y'all, is in the packet, just for information. And just, Colin, in the future, do we need to make that be on a consent in the future?
We can put it anywhere you like, we can put it in the information, so there's nothing to vote on, it's more of an FYI.
Okay. All right, in that case, let's just put it in the information in the future.
Okay.
Thanks. The city has requested a follow-up meeting on May the 19th. Need to make a motion if you would like to do that, and I'll be happy, or we can just meet with the mayor, chair, whatever y'all would like to do. Be happy to make whatever happen.
What's the purpose of the meeting?
Follow up on the, I guess what the independent work that they've been doing. Thank you.
So on Wednesday, the Board of County Commission, City Commission, and the School Board are having a joint meeting, which should be fun, with 17 of us. And I guess I would say, Colin will be presenting, part of that meeting, as well as, I believe, United Way on literacy. And so, I feel like we kind of need to have that meeting, and then see what comes out of that before we,
When is that?
Wednesday.
Wednesday, this Wednesday?
This week.
Okay. Okay, so do you, want to wait until the next meeting, which would not give much time for the setup? Do you want to tentatively pencil in a date, or do you want to just say, let's see how that meeting goes first, and then we'll get back to set up another time?
It seemed to me that we should at least have that meeting and then see what they want to meet about.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's lots that every organization's doing. And it's not that I don't want to meet, I do want to meet, but we're about to enter budget cycle, and I want to see what comes out of Wednesday.
Okay.
To get some action out of Wednesday.
Do we want to hold that date, because it's far enough in advance now, and then if it doesn't require a meeting jointly, we can just cancel that out, so that we should hold the date, we're not scrambling for a date.
I know that the city manager and the city, as far as I know, has it blocked off on their calendar for holding it, kind of like what you suggested. They also suggested that, if we should go ahead and schedule the meeting, that the city manager, myself, the mayor, and our chair meet, probably the last week of April to, review the agenda.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
The mayor chair thing?
But no, you're the chair, it's gonna be great.
No, I'm talking about, you're the chair of the city, county. So don't y'all still have the mayor chair?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Just worth that.
I mean, that's kind of my point, we meet 4 times a week, a year.
Yeah, but can I just say something? We don't.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You're the one that's exhausted by this.
No, I'm not exhausted, I'm happy to meet, if that's, yeah.
Okay, so why don't we make after hearing all that, would it be appropriate to make a motion that we tentatively put that on the schedule, and you'll have a joint meeting and see whether or not we need to follow through and actually have that meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll second that motion,
we have the motion to
because I want to do it.
Any discussion? Not being any, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Motion is unanimous. Now, let's see. We'll make sure we do what Colin suggested. Programs, okay, all right. Chris?
All right.
I told you this before, but I'm gonna tell you again. I don't know if y'all read in the information, Chrissy did a newsletter that I thought was excellent. So,
Thank you.
good job, and look forward to the next edition.
Thanks. So I'm going to start the programs report with the match request that we have received. The board has authorized the trust to accept match funding requests from organizations throughout the county. We have received our first request from the Children's Home Society. They are requesting match funds for their University of Central Florida grant that currently funds $255,000 to sustain the community partnership school at Howard Bishop Middle School. And so what you'll find in your packet is the item that details the information that they're requesting. They're requesting $57,004. That includes a full-time wellness coordinator and then $8,000 for 2 AmeriCorps members dedicating 30 hours to the school. The fiscal impact for this request is $15,194 for fiscal year 2021 and $41,811 for fiscal year 2022. Their outcome measures, you'll find a performance measure sheet at your, everyone should have a copy of that. Their outcome measures, they're looking to, this is the implementation of their wellness at the school. And they're looking to increase their, not only their referrals, but the services that the children are receiving that attend Howard Bishop Middle School. So they're looking to increase vision, primary care, behavioral health referrals, dental services as well, in hopes that it will decrease instructional time that's lost for those children that are out for different medical reasons. With it being a community partnership school, having those services right there for not only the children but their families and that Howard Bishop community. So that is the request before you. The trust is asking that the executive director is asking the trust to authorize him to initiate the contract negotiation process for the match funds with the Children's Home Society. Any questions for that request?
I actually had one. So what was not entirely clear to me, seems like they're adding components to the program using the dollars that the trust would provide.
That is correct.
So I guess but that grant, that 255, I think is an ongoing grant that they've had from UCF. So my question, I guess, was where was the grant match coming from before? Were they doing it as in kind and then not able to provide an additional service, or how does that work?
So this is, I'll have to follow up with them to find out exactly where it was coming from. You are correct that this is a new request for this position. One follow-up question that I did have for them was, how would they sustain this beyond what the trust would be funding it for if it was approved? And they're actually looking for and trying to identify other dollars through other grant opportunities. But I can follow up with them for that as I don't have the information right now.
Yeah, I mean, most grants don't like you to supplant one form of funding with another, and it seems like even though they're adding a component, it's still part of the original match requirement for this grant. And I just wanted to be careful about supplanting, because, Chrissy, you're right, the question then becomes, so what, is this going to be an ongoing request for us to match this, so that component is provided? I mean, I think it's a great idea, and I think having that kind of position I'm not objecting at all to what they're trying to do. I just want to make sure that it becomes sustainable, and that it's not supplanting existing grant dollars. Match dollars, sorry.
Yeah, and if it's a new award, yeah, I mean,
if it's a new award, that would be different.
It's a new grant, and they can.
Colin, do you have any information to kind of work with them? I'm suspecting, Maggie, when I read it, is that probably in-kind from the school district is what they probably reported in the past, since they are located, but I don't know that 100%.
I don't either, but that was also my.
And so, I tried to make contact with another board member who sits on their board, but she and I didn't connect before, this weekend, before today, so.
Yeah, so when the community school was originally constituted at Howard Bishop back several superintendents ago and several years ago, it got no funding from any external sources.
It's all privately funded.
You know, with the exception of whatever the Children's Home Society put in, and possibly some funds here and there and once in a while from, I believe, maybe CAP the last few years. And so, the first time, the community school model was adopted, not this last legislative session, but the one before, by the Department of Education, and that was the first time that Howard Bishop received any funding from the state that required any match. And the model there is that they have one coordinator and a person kind of in charge of the services at the school, and then some other positions, one that deals with out of school time, another that deals with wellness, and the third one is a parent engagement coordinator. So those are the core functions, and the reason they never had to meet a match is because they never got any funding. So this would be the second year that they've gotten some funding, and they are required to show a cash match of 25% going forward. I don't know exactly how they did it last year. Remember last year I was leaving there and coming here, but anyways, that's just kind of the backstory. So this is a new position because it's even the legislature's intent to not completely fund the community school, that it is supposed to be sustained at some point with some dollars in the community. So I hope that's helpful.
Dr. Hart?
I have a real interest in community schools. This is kind of like our first experiment, dipping our toe in the water at the mall, right? Would anyone else on the board like to hear a report from them about, you know, what their plans are, who their partners are? Like, I'd like to know who's giving you dental care, because I know other places in the community that dental care is being funded for schools. Are they getting it? If not, can we help them connect up? And I have a feeling this is just an incy-wincy request, which is going to grow and expand. So I think we need to be apprised of what they're doing and hopefully get in on the ground floor of it if we see certain things can be added or subtracted from the plan. You know, am I just being too meddlesome, or what do you guys think? Because we might want to have another community school somewhere else in town, for example.
I think that's a good idea, and I think, that's expanding the services they offer, because they've been limited in funding, has been, that's been one of the hindrances, but I do think it would be a good idea. Just serving that middle school population who oftentimes gets overlooked. Everyone's looking at the younger students, you know, the preschoolers and elementary age kids, sometimes middle school.
I think Gainesville for All identified that school as being in a neighborhood where families would benefit from having a community school. So I'm kind of interested in what they're doing.
So, Dr. Hart, would you like to make a motion to request that the Children's Home Society make a presentation?
To
Say
it,
a
yes.
15 or 20 minute presentation in a round table.
So,
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
second.
Motion is second, any discussion?
So, I don't want this funding, though, to be dependent upon that presentation.
No,
Is that what you're
no.
saying? That's not what
Yeah,
you're saying?
no, not
Okay,
so
so this is
true and
a
unrelated, yes, yes.
Any public input? I have two comments, and perhaps, and Carly, there are some things, that they are using as goals that seem like it's things that are services that are currently being provided in the schools is to the student nurse, the nurses, for the students, like the vaccinations, and I've been gone long enough, from the commission that at one point, it seemed like the vaccinations were off the charts, and then they went from the flu mist to shots, and they went down from that, and then they started, a couple of years ago, they started the flu mist again. Are they not getting the type of response to the flu mist that they did previously?
Yeah, so the Department of Health, they have a cabinet, he sits on the cabinet, and that was his interest, is, one of his priorities is increasing the percentage of kids that could get flu shots. And so that has been a flat number, and so part of having a wellness coordinator, would be to see that number go up. That is one thing I do know. So it has been tough with shots, always to convince them to show up, so it takes some effort.
Didn't it go back to, Ken, didn't it go back to flu mist, the year, the last year that I was there, or are they not doing the flu mist anymore? They are?
I think,
I
So,
suspect the issue is getting the parents to consent. And
Right.
all
That is
the
the issue.
paperwork. I can't imagine a school nurse would have the ability to,
That is correct.
that, with that large a population, would be my guess.
all of the organization that's getting any form of vaccination is a
okay, so this is something that y'all feel would be fine.
I mean, I would agree with Dr. Hart, I really appreciate these school models, we have these in Ohio, and the services from all the healthcare,
Well, and the point is, we did the 1 mil, and one of the big push was the fact that it would allow nurses in all the schools. So, is this something that y'all feel will help nurses, do this, or is it something that the nurses aren't doing and, you know, it gives them time to do something else?
I mean, as far
And I'm
as,
not trying to put you on the spot, I need help, because, I mean, that, in my mind, and anybody can correct me, that was a big push, you know, when they did the 1 mil originally. The fact that it would allow a nurse in every school. And so, you know, and I'm sure that they're inundated with all kinds of, things for little Johnny and Susie. But, you know, it seems like this falls right in line with something that should be provided by the nurse for the vision screening, the mental health. I don't think it's, you know, I think
Sure,
that's probably something that they probably do need help. But is that something that you feel like will help, the nurses give numbers, or does it just allow them to do something else?
I think, I hope I'm understanding your question. So are you asking if this additional focus on the fluid is beneficial to our nurses for
What I'm
having all
asking,
sorts
what
of
I'm asking
responsibilities?
is that they've asked for, that one of their goals, is to take it from, up to, 25 children or 51 children, in the school, to participate in flu mist. And I think up to 100 for vision screening, and I'm not sure what it was for mental health, and something for as far as dental services. So my question is that something the school's already doing, and they need help, you know, increasing the numbers, or is it something that they will kind of take this over, and then the nurse has something else to do?
So specifically for this coming year, we are still going to be working with the components associated with COVID. And I can tell you now, our nurses and our health techs have a lot
Okay.
to process. So I would look at any sort of
System.
assistance that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. Is that something that you can look into?
Chair Peterson, can I ask? So what this position does is a lot of the groundwork, you know, boots on the groundwork. A lot of the things that the nurses need assistance with. So following up with the children, following up with the parents, explaining, going into detail to those family members. And I know many of us think, oh, it's just a flu shot. They could understand that. But it's really that groundwork, that almost case management with the families to make sure that they understand what it is they're getting, why it's so important that we get it back, and why the follow-up with the children and the families are needed. And so it really is that additional assistance that can be used for the nurses.
Okay. And the other thing is, it wasn't really in the report, is that they delineated certain, goals that they would like to see happen. Will we get a report back saying whether or not it happened?
Absolutely. So initiating this contract negotiation process helps us with those deliverables, as well as the performance measures and the monthly reports that come in. It's those monthly programmatic reports that will generate the income. It's just not a payment that will happen. They will be required to submit those monthly reports as well as those deliverables to generate that payment.
So if they don't deliver, then they don't get the funding?
It's very similar to that. It'll be much more, restricted, if you will, as it relates to the payment. They can't just, what I see now with a lot of our payments is sometimes it just generates income by submitting an invoice. It's that performance measure that is missing with some of our contracts now. And so that will be included in all of our contracts moving forward.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. That's good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, any further questions?
Need a motion?
We've got one, I believe, don't we? Yes. Did we get one?
The first one was to have,
No,
to
actually.
get the report, to have a report.
Okay, and we did that, we took care of that. That one is.
Need a motion?
No,
We're
okay.
discussing it.
Ashley's helping me. No, that was it, so,
Because we haven't voted yet.
right, so all those in favor of the motion to have the Children's Home Society come and make a presentation, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion's unanimous. Now we need a motion for,
I'll move approval of the match request funding.
okay,
Second, Tina.
can we have a motion and a second? Any discussion? Any public discussion? Dr. Cole, Smith, or Cheryl, if y'all have a question, I don't see, I'm dependent on Ashley, so. All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed? The motion is unanimous. Okay, Christie?
Okay. The next item in the programs report is sponsorship request funds. We have received two different sponsorship requests. I'll start with the first one, and that is the Greater Duval Neighborhood Association. They are requesting sponsorship for their annual Summer Sling event to take place on June 26th. They are expecting 40 individuals to attend their event in the Greater Duval neighborhood area. The Summer Sling event, this will be their second event where they pull families together to address the summer slide. And the way they do that is they encourage the children to participate in poetry, reading, and writing. And they award them different gifts based on their age range. They have different categories for different grades, and that's how they award the children for participating. Also, during the Summer Sling event, it is an opportunity for them to inform the community or the residents in that neighborhood of the different summer programming that will be taking place in that area. And so they have requested a sponsorship of $2,495 from the Children's Trust. Do you guys want me to go to the second one, or do you?
Okay, why don't you go ahead and do them both?
All right. The second request that we received is from the Genesis Family Enrichment Center. They are organizing a trust-based relational intervention caregiver workshop. That workshop, they would like to open it up to 100 families to attend. These families have children in their families that may be dealing with trauma, and so they are interested in opening up that workshop to allow families to participate. They have requested $2,500 for 100 families to enroll that day. Both organizations, if funded, are required to submit to the trust how they will promote and inform the community that the trust has sponsored their event. The trust is also creating an evaluation tool to submit to all organizations that have requested sponsorship dollars from the trust. And I can take any questions that you guys have regarding those two requests.
Any questions?
Move that recommendation.
Second. Good. Motion by Bill. Certain. Any discussion? Any public discussion? Karen, are you raising your hand? any public input on the motion, which is to approve funding? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is unanimous.
Can I just say, I think there's a real good opportunity for our communications folks to really get out into the community and help people. So thanks for bringing this forward.
You're welcome.
I will say, Greater Duval, they didn't have their summer sling last because of 19, it was a really good event that they had, out at one of the parks on, because they brought in other organizations, I thought, the community organization, Habitat for Humanity had a booth there, one other, organization that had people to get information about the summer programs for their youth, and these are like 10 kids that really, I think, to really, but they had about 40 kids that they took to the city commission meeting, took to Tallahassee, did some academic enrichment. So I think this is a good opportunity for the communications person to connect with them, but also a good one for us to support, to really get to a really hard to reach population.
Good, that's great. Okay. All right.
I kind of wish we could see some of the products, some of the prize winners, because I thought it's really good stuff, their essays, their videos.
I think they'll share with us. I think we should ask them, Chrissy.
Yeah.
I think they'll share.
You can do that.
You said you're gonna report back on.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I sure can.
Okay?
All right, next up is, the summer RFP funding recommendations. So on, go ahead, okay, all right. So, on page, 120, you'll find the item for the summer RFP, and, I am going to ask that my slide is available. Give me 1 second, I just want to make sure you guys have this information. And while they're working on that, I'll just go ahead and with my discussion items. So, summer RFP, an exciting time at the trust as we were receiving the applications for the summer RFP. And I do have my slide here, and so on the slide as well as in the packet, what you will find is a list of the providers that submitted an application for summer slots through the trust. The review team consisted of Colin and I, and I'm not sure if you remember or not, but each organization was rated on their organizational eligibility, their organizational capacity, the site profiles that they submitted, as well as their site budgets. That second column under average score is the column that is the final score, the average score for each organization after Colin and I rated each application. We have this one form that you see shows you all the organizations that received a 4. Anyone receiving a 4, we are recommending for funding. You can see there that it has their total request, the number of sites that they are applying for, the amount of their enrollment fees, total request for scholarships, and what they are requesting for reimbursement. Those reimbursements consist of field trips, transportation, and materials for that program. That last column where it says total number of CTAC scholarships, those are the number of children that they are proposing that would be covered under the full and partial scholarships. I'm going to go to the next slide, and this next slide is important because you'll see in that very last column where it says total, if we were to fund all the programs that received a 4, that's $761,553. If you continue below the organizations that received a 4, where it starts with the Alachua County Board of County Commissioners, those organizations received a 3.5. Same information follows. When we include the organizations with 3.5, takes us up to 1 million. And then the organizations that received a 3, which is the City of Alachua and Star Center Children's Theater, that takes us up to $1.2 million. There are 2 additional organizations that received the 2.5. They are not being recommended for funding, and then 1 non-responsive application. We had a total of 26 providers to submit applications. The trust, as you guys know, we conducted a bidders conference as well as an application training. We hosted a technical assistance open lab for organizations that needed additional support with their applications. And then all applications were due by 6 p.m. on March 30. The trust is recommending that you authorize the executive director to negotiate contracts with the organizations that scored a 3 or higher. We are asking that you set a maximum overall award of $1 million. We realize that if we include those that scored a 3 or higher, that takes us to 1.283. We are looking to negotiate the contract, which means that there are some costs that can be negotiated down. An example, someone may have asked for $20,000 in transportation costs. That is that's up for negotiation. So we would like to begin negotiation to not exceed $1 million, knowing that we'll be able to negotiate several of the costs. There are several organizations that, if you look at the enrollment fees, it's a miscalculation of how enrollment fees work, where they're asking for enrollment fees for the same children every single week. An enrollment fee is like a registration. It's a one-time fee. So we are going to negotiate those costs. We are also asking, the trust is asked to authorize the executive director to present results of the final negotiation on the consent agenda for the May 10th board meeting. I am happy to take any questions. Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. My question, in the transportation, did anyone submit for purchase of vehicles?
No. This RFP did not allow for purchase of vehicles, no. I do want to bring your attention to this slide. This slide was created to show you the location of the proposed summer programs. Are those the ones that we're on this one? Okay, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So when I look at the number of kids served,
Mm-hmm.
looks like if we take those bottom 2 out, we'll be right around 2,300. And the 2 biggest ones are Good News Arts and Alachua County. What's Alachua County?
That was my question.
But it seemed like
$190,000.
Is that for Camp
Cossawilla.
So that is a new program, that would be a new program, largely subsidized. Okay, that's great. And then what's the Good News Arts?
Good News Arts is, I believe that's the one that is a partnership with the city of High Springs. Mm-hmm, the city of High Springs, yes.
Okay, that's great.
That's good, okay.
So then, Colin, I guess my question is, you're asking for $1 million. It seems like you need a little bit more than $1 million. 20% above what is scheduled. Do you need $1.2 million? Do you need $1.1 million?
I think we're good.
I know your shoes squeak a lot, like Lee and I, which I appreciate, but I also don't wanna leave 100 kids out because, you know, we're a little tight here. I mean, do you need a little bit more?
So are you talking, you wanna fund, explain to me what you're.
I would think with $1.28 million of requests, you would ask for like $1.2 million or $1.1 million. And I don't wanna constrain you. I appreciate that you're gonna negotiate, but I also appreciate that Steve programs are critically important this first summer. So I just want to, I don't want to constrain you with a 25% reduction of what they're requesting, or 20% reduction of what they're
That's fine, if you want to propose some more. The reason I think we get there is there was a lot of mistakes on the enrollment fees.
requesting. Oh,
And there were several camps that asked for, and the county was one, actually, that asked us to serve weeks where school wasn't out yet. These were just mistakes, so when we start crossing out those weeks, and it'll get the price down. You
oh, so
give
that
us.
1,280,000 is not a real number, it's closer to $1 million.
Yes, I mean, if you wanted to authorize, split the difference and say 1.1 to give us a cushion, that would be fine. But we think, I mean, just in looking, just the normal mistakes in filling out the
budget.
application, we think it's just a little on the high side.
So who would that exclude? Would it include the threes
It-
and then exclude the 2.5?
We're not recommending funding those three programs regardless of what amount of funding you give us.
That's what three programs?
Actually, the two, just two.
Oh, I'm sorry, the two, no.
Okay.
What we're saying is that 1.28 is what they asked for, but when you look at their total request, and Christie goes through them, there's some mistakes and weeks that aren't eligible for service under the RFP that should bring the cost down. I mean, if you want to go higher, and authorize us higher, that would be fine. We're going to do the right thing anyways and follow the RFP regardless
Yeah.
of what the number is you tell us.
But the 1283 still includes the programs that score 3.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Right,
yep,
okay.
Star Center, City of Alachua, yes, they would all be included.
Yep, that includes all programs.
You know me, I like these maps, and I was real interested to see where the programs are, but that doesn't tell us where the children are from. Because we know the transportation requests have been included in here, and can we, I guess we don't know yet, which kids are gonna participate, but I wanna be sensitive to the fact that there may be a desert somewhere here that we don't know about yet. So can we follow up when we know where the kids who were able to participate come from? There's something we need to address next time.
Absolutely. So each program will go through a training after we negotiate contracts and we have our final providers. They'll go through training, they'll collect data. That data will include those locations of where those families reside, and we'll be able to provide that with our end of the summer report.
And then, can I just ask one other question? I'm always real conscious of, since I'm a parent that went through this, this thing lasts for 2 weeks, that thing lasts for 3 weeks. It would be really nice if things didn't overlap and I could just sign up for this 2 weeks and that 3 weeks. And in other words, can the grantees at some point in time, maybe not right now, but communicate with each other and be asked to collaborate with each other on behalf of the children and the parents so that children can get a longer and more continuous experience through the summer, going from one program to the next. I'm assuming these programs don't last all summer. I mean, I don't know.
Many of them do. Many of them last all summer, absolutely. Several of them last the full, 6 to 8 weeks. I think summer's gonna be 8 weeks, so many of them do, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Singh?
So I would like to throw out an additional hope of collaboration and discussion, because I do have employees who are bus drivers, and specifically COVID has impacted their additional revenue sources, specifically this year with lack of field trips. And so we are looking at ways to fund them within our own organization to make sure that we don't lose them, because when we do lose bus drivers to other professions, we run into issues with just getting new people certified for CDL. We already have a driver shortage. So I would like to be involved with perhaps the negotiations and see what we can do
Absolutely.
to provide the transportation.
So that was a piece, Mr. Chair, of information. We didn't want to put the superintendent on the spot, but we've already discussed that there's both possibly some transportation savings and food at some of the programs through the summer break spot program that the district has, so.
What's this all about?
That's what
Collaboration?
this is.
So anyway, that would be, provide some additional, possibly if it all works out, provide some additional savings, so.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
At some point, are we gonna get a feel for what these programs are gonna do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's hard to sit here, and we see the ratings, and I'm not saying I want, by no means do I want to read proposals. But I would kind of just like, a sentence or two about
Summer.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have our programmatic.
Aiming to do and kind of service there. I know some of these organizations, I know some of what they do, but I don't know all of them. It'd be nice to know what we're, funding, and also just really what area of our priorities
Mhm.
they're, meeting.
So the staff and I are putting together a, program directory, and it will include, an executive summary of that camp, but also that exact information that you are requesting. So we're working on that.
Any further questions?
Motion? So, four-part motion, we got three recommended. So the first is the trust, I would move that the trust authorize the executive director to contract with organizations that scored a 3 or higher. Part two, the trust set a maximum overall award amount of $1,000,001. 3, authorize the executive director to work with superintendent of schools to facilitate transportation for the programs with the drivers and food. And then 4, authorize the executive director to present the results of the final negotiation on the consent agenda at May 10th.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Any public discussion? Sure.
Request. With the ESSER funding, there are certain assurances, and I can send those to you, but when you're coming up with the summaries, that might be helpful to check off, so we on our other side can make sure that we're as well, just to figure out which one.
Yes.
I will request that on. I'll send it over.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye. So,
Let's get this out.
I guess I should have known that the Alachua County was Tuscola, because we talked a lot about this at the county commission. And one of the things that,
Commissioner Wheeler might be upset if you.
I know, I'll just blame it on the shot, okay? So,
COVID brain.
one of the things, though, that the board really wanted to make an effort on, we got Camp Crystal. A lot of the kids can't get into Camp Crystal, can't afford to have camp. And so, that's really was one of the catalysts to push that, and the board authorized some and accelerated not only the hiring of a director, but also some capital improvements. And so, if we can get kids that have never been to camp or have very low opportunities of camp and have the school board kind of market that to those kids, that's really the intent, and the county will work as closely with you as you need them to.
And Ms. People said that today was the first day of the director for,
Oh, great. So I haven't, I don't know who that person is actually. I know she had a good application.
Colin, asking if you need a list.
That's a great story, and it's really kind of everyone coming together.
So you're in development of the marketing at this point, is that what you said?
I guess, I think the executive director was just hired and started today, so that, you'll now have a person that wakes up every morning thinking about that, and we need to just connect them.
Sorry, one more.
I'm sorry.
What age groups are you? Do you know? I haven't.
I know.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Christie, is it?
That was,
K to 8?
yeah, I think.
K to 8.
Dr. Stein?
Just for the program, first of all, I really appreciated how you all presented this information, and I'm sure it was a tremendous amount of work to go through this process and look at 2027. I'm wondering, after we get through this initial sources, these initial fundings, the initial programs that are up and running, if we might not want to give some consideration to having a review committee for proposals that has some community membership. In an advisory capacity to you in your office, it strikes me that that would be a very helpful way for us to have the community feel really engaged in this process. Without the oversight and the final decisions could absolutely rest with Colin and Christie, but it just strikes me, it's a model that United Way used for years with their community impact committee.
Right.
And it's very successful.
I know that the commission and Kim will probably be the most recent source of knowledge. The commission at one point had a citizens advisory. And, after doing it that way for years, it was recommended that we go and do it in-house, and that's the way it's been done
Special staff, yeah.
for the last 5 years or so. I don't know what the switch was, but, you know, it might be worth a conversation with Ms. Tuck to see why it transitioned, because obviously United Way does it that way. But United Way is pretty much, other than the administrative staff, is total volunteers.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about a way to link the committees or the, whatever they're called, the work groups or whatever we're calling them, like the meeting that Nancy and I had, or the meeting that you all had, you know, with the agencies and the experts who are involved in these areas. So how do we continue to get input about whether we're on the right track from the
Yeah. Colin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, we do have a policy, how we're gonna do that, and for this one, our policy says that we're supposed to get subject matter experts, and unfortunately, in this quick of a RFP, and get it done in a month,
Yeah.
Christie and I were the best you had, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's my point, that's where I was.
We've already talked about that, and we need to develop a pool of subject matter experts, so we will be coming out with an application process. I do not support anything like how the United Way or those things do it, because they usually do one big grant process, and I don't see us doing, I see us doing, we wanna do targeted things, it's gonna require specific expertise that we're gonna have to go out and find to evaluate these specific, and I've done this before. And I think the question is, though, a good question from you, Doctor, is if the board wants to roll, the board could decide that at least in every solicitation, one board member could be a subject matter expert and participate in the review, or not, it's up to the board members, but it's our job, and we've already discussed, we have to recruit these, I think, subject matter experts, for these various solicitations that come out. If we do a big, huge committee, we will never be able to give out the money as fast as we wanna.
No, that wasn't what I was suggesting, I was
Oh, sorry.
suggesting exactly what you just said, that you and Christie just said.
Okay, all right.
Good job.
Well, I think it was a good point.
Well, and that's, you know, that way we also get the feedback about the application process, you know, and are there things that we need to change, because we always heard that on the commission. So do you conclude, Christie?
Yeah.
Good job. Great job.
Thank you.
Colin?
I think she did a great job. Okay, would someone please put my presentation up? I'm going to go fast, because we have important people that would like to speak. Okay. Oh, I guess I have it in front of me, so I can look at what I've got. I have just a few things I'd like to go through really fast.
That's ready.
Now I have to click. Which one do I do? Okay. All right. Several things on here are just updates that I promised to follow up with the board. Board policies are in progress. What that means is, Dr. Labarda has sent me, some things that she has used in the past, and I'm reviewing those, and sometime between now and the end of this, fiscal year, probably in either June or August, we'll get together and have our first meeting and go through and say, the policies we've already passed, and maybe we could even consider our award process in that, and what we like, and what we think we need to change, so by the end of this year, we can have a full suite of policies starting on October 1. I also wanted to let you know that tomorrow is the due date for our accounting services RFP. We should get, hopefully we'll get some responses. If not, we might have to ask Ken Cornell if he'll be our accountant. Anyways, hopefully we'll get a few, and, tomorrow's the due date. I don't expect to get any before the due date.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And let's see, Commissioner Cornell may or may not remember, but he asked me to follow up on a number of items regarding employee evaluation and all sorts of things. And we have surveyed the Children's Services Councils and are compiling the results. We should be able to report back that at the May meeting, if that's okay. That seemed to be the easiest way to get all the information.
I didn't remember, but I freaked out when I saw my name in the backup, so I'm glad you reminded me.
And, as I think has already been discussed, there is a joint meeting on Wednesday, and tomorrow I'm going to spend time figuring out what I'm going to say at that meeting, because I think each of those organizations has heard from me once, with the exception of maybe the school board, but I know some of those people, so. Anyways, to me, the biggest, so when I finally saw the agenda of that meeting, and I don't know where it is, but, oh, here it is. Honestly, the biggest problem right now in our field, children's services, and it's not just here, it's with all my colleagues, is everybody is trying to figure out how to best deploy money in the context of the money that is flowing down through the state from the feds. And I think the consensus is it's a lot, but it won't last forever. So, when you look at, how that might impact, this meeting, I haven't figured out yet, but when we talk, I'll talk a little bit about, the budget, because we're supposed to submit a budget in May. When we talk about, for example, the early childhood field, 0 to 5, there's a lot of money coming through the, feds to the state, and some of the ideas the state has is, for example, raising the school readiness threshold from 150% of poverty to 200% of poverty, and how long will they be able to keep that up if they do? They've also recognized the need for, infrastructure for some of the child care centers, meaning physical infrastructure, actually grants to child care centers to do physical improvements on their property. But there seems to be a gap in this issue of wages for child care workers. And it's not just COVID and wages, but we have this rapidly increasing minimum wage to the state, notwithstanding its merits. It is going to have an impact on that industry, and I'm not really sure that anyone's figured out exactly what to do, because if you raise wages on the one side but don't have the revenue coming in on the other side, it's a real problem. That is some of the issues. The other issue, there's other issues like Dr. Simon has already mentioned. ESSER, I think they're on ESSER, already had ESSER 1, ESSER 2 in the middle, and 3's coming, and it's like a lot of money, I mean a lot. So when people call me and say, hey, is the trust coming out with any more funding, I say, go call the superintendent. Because they have got a lot, and when you look at what they proposed in their budget meeting, community schools was on there, mental health was on there, summer was on there, after school, a lot of things that typically they ask trusts to help with. I know in at least 2 other counties, the school district this year funded completely every kid to go to summer programming with a portion of their ESSER money. And so we are all trying to figure out how to best work with our school districts and our early learning systems and some of these other things on how to deal with this money that's coming down, but also be prepared for when it goes away. And that doesn't take into consideration what we'll hear about at the end of our meeting in our roundtable section of all the changes that prior to COVID were coming down in child welfare, which will make not only a big impact to our state, but possibly here for us locally. So that's just the context of, these are some of the issues I see coming down in our community that will impact the type of budget that we submit. So if I just click through, I don't know how well you can see this, but when we submit the budget, our first go at it in May next month, we'll assume a 3% increase in property values. That's probably a little low. The state just had their estimating conference, and I think they said about 3.53 is what they thought statewide, but we can start at 3 and see where we end up.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
One of the things that I don't know how much of a city problem it is, but for the school board and for the county, the infrastructure of the internet.
Of the what? Of the internet.
How is that going to be brought up? Because I know it's a real problem for the schools and for the certain parts of the county, and probably even there's certain areas in the city, but not as much.
It'd be a good one-time investment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I've heard with all this money coming down is an emphasis for once on capital outlay. Even in Tallahassee, they were kind of saying that C word, which they used to tell you, don't even ever come up here and ask for anything capital outlay. And now they're saying, well, this money maybe one time.
Well, and the infrastructure funding is a whole nother.
Right, which is
that
all
we haven't
capital.
even-
Yeah, which is all capital, yeah.
So Lee, Dr. Simon and the chair of the school board, Dr. Neely, the mayor and the city manager, and Michelle and I met. And really the theme of this meeting on Wednesday is equity. And the different components of equity are youth literacy, which Collins can touch on, and youth programming. But then it's digital access, broadband, and then transportation. And on the digital access, Dr. Simon really made the point, which I thought was the point, is that under the rescue plan, which we're gonna get guidance from Treasury at the end of April, because the money's gonna start flowing May 11th. There is a big push for county, city, small cities, but also the smaller cities and schools to solve this broadband problem. And COVID kind of really highlighted it for many of our kids that couldn't connect. And so, the county commission, and I know the city commission are deeply committed to working with the school board to try to do whatever we can with that one-time money, to get that infrastructure, or at least some of it in place. You know, we haven't even begun to start thinking about the recurring issue, but I think getting the infrastructure in place is really the key. And so GRUCOM goes to all the schools, but there could be an issue with the countywide system with GRUCOM, and so we talked to Michelle on the way here. But the meeting on Wednesday is really to get, I think, a commitment from the elected that when the Treasury guidance comes out at the end of this month, that we are committed to broadband connectivity from an equity perspective for all our kids.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's really the summary of what this meeting is about.
So anything I say would be anticlimactic at this point, so I'm just gonna move actually to the finance section. I will say this though, I don't even know if you can see this on the screen.
Yeah, that's page 75.
Okay, so, in the context of, the context of what we're gonna present, our budget, I don't know, Todd is gonna talk in a minute about how much money we think we're gonna have left over at the end of this year. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that we can also do some kind of, capital offering of a different sort. I just don't know what it would be yet, given all the other potential capital money flowing down to different places. What this chart does right here is just kind of takes us through the work of where we are to date with our 4 goals and our indicators in the first 2 rows. And then the third row, and this is our framework of results-based accountability, as far as what's worked, is basically an amalgamation of everything we've heard through our the technical advisory committee, previous needs assessments, the strengths and gaps analysis that Barzella has done, and what we know in conversations that we've had individually with different people in different systems. Of course, programs are the only thing. We're going to have some ideas for community engagement and policy, program planning and development, and then just how, what we run our organization. But this is kind of the framework we're going to use to, present our budget. But I did want you to know, you're going to hear a big number of what we're going to have left over at the end of this year, and it's not outside the realm of possibility that we can also contribute some capital to some strategic places where it may be important. It's just not clear to me where that is today. And I think a lot of it depends on what happens in the next few weeks in Tallahassee as well. So, all right, by the way, speaking of Tallahassee, I hope you have all seen the Capital Connections emails with the legislative updates. Thank Dan for getting those out. That information is compiled from the Florida Children's Council, and I hope you've all found that helpful.
Yep.
I will say that thumbs up to Senator Perry has had 2 bills move. One of them is, it got through the Senate, his expungement bill, Senate Bill 274, where any juvenile 0 to 17, whether it's a misdemeanor or felony, they can complete a diversion program, is eligible for expungement with certain exceptions, of course. And the other one is he's actually getting a bill through to, this is more of a policy bill, to finish some key data collection, which will be completed by the Zucker Center, to then make policy recommendations around fiscal cliffs in Florida. In other words, as we see the minimum wage rise, as we see people's wages go up, they're going to roll off certain benefit programs, which can actually put them in a position of being in a fiscal cliff where they're worse off working than they were before. And so his bill will allow the legislature to gather the rest of the data to make some policy recommendations going forward. Did I say that right, Dr. Snyder?
It is, but I just want to point out too, it is the Zucker Center, but it also is the Family Data Center that Dr. Hart was responsible for many years, and it's now being directed to the Institute for Child Health.
It's hard to recognize everyone. Everyone is just so prestigious around here. You just miss it. But yes, so thank you. So that's it for me. I think next is,
I have a question, and this kind of just goes into the infrastructure discussion. So the summer programs that we're talking about funding, are we going to host on our website, like all these programs and how families can register and how this looks, so there's like a one-stop shop?
do we have our website able to pull up right now? It just, yes, if we don't, it's fine. We don't, okay. We have, if you go on our website, you will find a button that says find a program. Now, it's blank, because we wanted to wait till this meeting was finished.
We're just putting it.
But up on the, well, you can see the button, but when you click the button, it'll come to an empty map. But after today, we will begin to put the information of everyone's website, their executive summary, and their
Oh, that's great.
registration information, and it'll be on our website.
That's great.
And right now, the only programs we'll have, there will be summer programs, but as we build out our funding portfolio, we'll be able to see, filter for other programs as well.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you, Colin. We need to get back to item, which is summer RFP funding recommendations. Ken, I just noticed this in our package. Would you include the resolution 2021-5 to make the, change the resolution to 2021?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Add that to.
Number 37. Okay, all right. I think Todd is on deck now. I thought, didn't we already vote on that?
Vote on it, do you want to vote again?
Oh, no, I
Change the resolution?
forgot.
No. Just to clarify the motion.
Yeah, just to clarify,
Clarify the motion, change the resolution. Thank you.
to include that, the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for being here.
Sure, good afternoon. I'm sorry you'll probably have to see me 2 meetings in a row. As noted in your backup material, the audit partner that oversees the audit engagement for Children's Trust, is also, scheduled to present to the city of Alachua tonight, and so he had a conflict and couldn't be here today. But we still wanted to share at least where, the financial statement and the statement of net position ended for Children's Trust and for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2020. And then next month at your meeting, you'll hear the full audit, report from the auditor himself that did the engagement. And part of the reason I think the timing was appropriate now is, the executive director starts beginning work on next year's budget. We kind of wanted to show you where you ended your first full fiscal year from a financial position, and now we're already 6 months into your current fiscal year, and where that's at and kind of where it's projected to go by the end of the year as the executive director builds his budget. So on page 80 of your packet is the first, financial statement that's included in your agenda, and this is just called Statement of Revenues and Expenditures and Changes in Fund Balance. And for your first fiscal year, the trust only had one fund, it was your general fund. And this statement sort of lays out almost what an income statement would look like with revenues and expenditures. As an independent special district, that's funded through a millage rate, the primary revenue source, of course, is ad valorem taxes, and that's listed at the top of the page. We collected $7.3 million in ad valorem taxes. Some other income included interest earnings on those revenues, as well as some grant income. Then we work our way down in the page, to the expenditures that the program had for fiscal year 20, and again, this all happened as of September 30th, 2020, so keep that in mind as we review these first 2 statements. Under expenditures, we list the program expenditures first, and then admin underneath that. So you'll see the largest expenditure was actual grant awards of over $1.5 million that was actually paid out and or accrued for fiscal year ending September 30, 2020. We had some operating costs in program of $345,000, and then under administration, the way the trust was set up in 20 didn't really have any salary costs because all of that ran through an interlocal agreement with Alachua County. So those administrative costs are shown under operating, and that totaled $334,000 and change. And that also included fees that the tax collector and property appraiser charge per statute to handle the tax base as well as tax collection. We run all those numbers through, and we ended the year with a fund balance position of $5,182,749. So that is the ending fund balance that the trust had at September 30, 2020. The next statement, and as I'm going through this, if anyone has a question, feel free to interject. Page 81 just then sort of shows how that fund balance is, what consisted of the fund balance. So at the top, we show the assets and cash and investments that the trust had at September 30th. We did have some accounts payable and some monies owed to that interlocal to Alachua County Board of County Commissioners at September 30th. So those were accrued back as liabilities. And then all those cleared out in October and November as far as payments. Then we get down to fund balance, and we show how that $5.1 million fund balance was assigned. And that assignment is a governmental accounting standard that we have to follow. It shows, hey, of that fund balance, there's some of that was assigned out through this board and through the executive director by carrying over some of the grants that were awarded. So those were carried into the 2021 budget. There was some that was set aside for reserves and some that was set aside for future program capacity expansion. And then that leaves an unassigned fund balance at the end of the year of $1.7 million. I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions about old stuff. Again, that's your first fiscal year ending last September. And then I'll jump into kind of newer data that shows where you're at now through the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 2021.
Any questions?
Okay, on page 82, this is just a quick report of the ad valorem tax collections. I think it's important with an independent district like this, being that your primary revenue source is ad valorem collections, that you really collect 90 to 95% of your revenue the first quarter or 2 of the year. But you obviously have expenditures throughout the full year. So right now is about the time where the investment portfolio that we help manage for the trust is at its highest peak, because we've basically collected all your revenues for the year, and we're gonna go through the rest of the summer and fall before your fiscal year ends, spending those down for both program costs and administrative costs. But this shows you a quick comparison of fiscal year 20, where we ended the year, where we're already at in the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 21 with tax collection. All right, I'm gonna jump into your general fund real quick. These are just budget to actuals, and I won't bore you with a lot of detail here. But the first few pages in your packet shows, so for FY 2021, the Children's Trust actually has 3 reporting funds. You have a general fund, which is where all your primary activity occurs. There was also a special revenue fund set up for some grant awards that you've received, both private grants and some CARES funding, and also a capital project fund that has been set up that is receiving a transfer from your general fund. So the first one I'll talk about is your budget to actual report that starts on page 83 for your general fund. Again, this just shows your ad valorem taxes and interest income on that page. On the back page, page 84, we list the personal services cost. So this is new for fiscal year 2021 because as of October 1, 2020, the Children's Trust now has actual employees that run through a third-party payroll system, and all of those costs are now captured here versus in the interlocal agreement that you had in the prior year with Alachua County. So this page 84 shows our budget to actual for all the staffing. Page 85 shows budget to actual for the operating costs, and this is both program and admin operating costs. So they're all listed in here together, and maybe in the future, now that I'm looking at this, we could probably split that out for you and differentiate admin versus program. And then on the last page, on page 86, is really where all the heavy lifting is. This is where you have all of your grant awards to various programs and and other entities that are being funded throughout the year. And that goes on, through page 87. So 86 and 87, shows our budget to actual for the various grants that have been awarded today. And as of, 2 quarters into the year, you had spent 1.1 million, has been paid out to agencies, and yet you still have 1.8 encumbered to all these various agencies. And I should have noted it in the FY 20 information. There were 36 agencies that received funding in various forms for your FY 20 audit, and you're on pace to have that many or more, especially with the RFP I just heard tonight for the summer program. So the last 2 pages in here, there's not been a lot of activity on them, so we won't spend a lot of time, but there will start being activity. You have the grants fund, and you just approved a budget amendment for it tonight. And as a matter of fact, while I was sitting here, I got an acknowledgement from the consultant that the county's using saying, the county staff has just been authorized to transmit $75,000 in CARES funding to the Children's Trust, so that literally came as I was walking in the door. So that'll go in your special revenue fund. And then on page 90 is your capital project fund, and again, this fund is primarily for now being funded by a transfer from your general fund that will happen through the rest of this year to give you a balance of $300,000 in there, and I'm sure it sounds like, as the executive director develops your budget next year, that might be a fund that you look at too, depending on what capital needs the Children's Trust has. With that, sir, I will open it up for questions.
Any questions? Okay, so we make a motion to accept the report. You have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Any public discussion?
Ms. Merritt, you would like to comment on the budget? Ms. Merritt, did you have a question? Big one. No. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Motion is unanimous. Thanks, Tom.
I'd just like to thank the staff, the director, the fiscal assistants that I work with. It's a pleasure, working with them and working on their finances. They were very responsive to the audit firm, so a lot of the back and forth communication with the auditors went directly to staff. My office, of course, helped coordinate all that, but I'm appreciative of all the hard work they do to help us together.
Well, as usual, we can't take anything for you. You've done such a pleasant manner, so we appreciate it, and, after you vote, you don't have to stay.
Good now. I'm interested to hear what else is going on.
All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Those opposed? Motion.
Okay, I believe it's time for the member roundtable, and I will turn it over to Colin to do the introductions.
Yes, background is in your packet. I know some people have to leave, so feel free. For the rest of you, the one big change that's going to be coming to our state is in child welfare. And the federal government a few years back passed the Family Prevention Services Act. And what I asked is one of the roles that I'm going to try to do is educate the board to help make better policy decisions. And for everyone that's interested in systems, which is all of you, because you've all mentioned the word several times, these are some systems that are pretty important to our community. So Tyler Tazinski is the Director of Strategic Planning with the Office of Child Welfare at California. And Ginger Griffith is from the Office of Child Welfare Policy and Practice. They're both going to give us about a 10-minute overview of some changes coming at the state level. And then I've asked Stephen Pennypacker, the CEO of the Partnership for Strong Families, to take what they've said and tell us what that means at the local level. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler and Ginger. So Ashley, can you make sure that they can get in?
Thank you, Colin.
Tyler?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Do I have control of the slides, or do you, Colin?
We do, so just go ahead and say next slide. Oh, wait,
Okay.
I guess I do. Do I have control? I guess I do, so just say next slide and I'll move it.
Fantastic, thank you. Ginger is not able to join us today. She had to jump off for something, so it'll just be me and then Stephen Pennypacker. But I wanted to introduce myself and thank the trust for allowing me to come speak to you. The federal government in, go ahead, next slide, sorry.
I'm not sure what I just did, so if someone could try to fix that for me. Go ahead and keep talking, Tyler, we'll fix it, I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, back in 2018, the federal government passed the Family First Prevention Services Act, which is a sweeping change really in the way that the federal government funds child welfare in the states. Historically, we have always used what's known as Title IV-E and Title IV-B as our main funds. And neither of them have paid for services. They've always paid post removal, and they've done foster care maintenance and things of that nature. Florida operated under a waiver to that for many years, and we were able to pay for prevention services. So in 2018, after this law passed, we can now claim for the first time federal dollars for prevention services in our communities. Senators Hatch of Utah and Wyden of Oregon had this language around for many years. And then it ended up passing in a budget resolution in 2018, much to a lot of people's surprise. So many states have been working their tails off to get this implemented. The state of Florida has been working toward a prevention model for many years as well, as you know, for those of you that have operated within this space. And one of our goals is to better engage municipalities, counties, and independent taxing districts like the trust to get more involvement in the use of primary prevention services. Next slide, please. So the FFPSA, as we call it, came along at a really good time because it has three main focal points. And those are to prevent entry into foster care. They are to engage families in prevention services and to provide care in the least restrictive environment possible, meaning families when and always possible. Next slide, please. So under the federal law, there are 8 sections of it. The first one is prevention activities under Title IV-E, which is what we'll be talking about today. And that plays, excuse me? Is everything okay? I had some feedback. And that plays against Part 4, which is ensuring necessity of placement that's not in a family foster home. You'll hear a lot of people when they talk about FFPSA talk about how we're restricting group homes. And really what they're doing is they are restricting how long group homes can be paid for with federal dollars now and pushing that savings, whatever savings that we get, toward prevention activities under the same title. So next slide, please. Florida's journey is quite complicated because this is an enormous system with multiple layers. Traditionally, we have operated in the safe, unsafe, and unsafe out of care, those 3 boxes to the right. For the first time, we have always been able to pay for those out-of-home care services, but now we can go to unsafe in-home with a safety plan and pay for those services. Anything that we deem to be a prevention service that stops the imminent removal into foster care, we can also use those funds for this yellow box or this orangish goldish box, safe or very high to moderate risk or family support services as we call them. So meaning they are not unsafe by state standards, but they are still an imminent threat of being removed from the home. So we can use those services. But what's interesting about FFPSA is they allow us, the state, to define what a candidate for foster care is, meaning a candidate is those that we deem to be of imminent threat to be removed to foster care, which allows us to open up this green box over here of community, allowing us to potentially pay for community prevention services. So I know that's a very busy slide and we can stay on this if you would like, but if you have questions afterwards, we can talk through them in questions. So if no one has questions now, we can go to the next slide. So part 1, the prevention part under Title IV-E, it allows the state to use funds for 3 very specific services. We can pay for in-home parent skills-based programs, we can pay for mental health services, and we can also pay for substance abuse prevention and treatment. They can fund 12 months for those children I said, were candidates for foster care and also for pregnant or parenting foster youth. The act also clarifies that children and youth under the guardianship of kin or other kin caregivers can also use these funds. So just because we don't place them in their home or in an out of home placement, even if they're with grandma or an aunt or an uncle, we can still use these prevention dollars for them as well. Next slide, please. So the programs that we offer under the prevention plan have to be trauma informed, meaning they have to provide under a structure that involves the understanding, recognition, and response of trauma, and with recognized principles of trauma-informed approach. And here's where we get into the technicalities of how they are going to control how much money is actually paid out. To be a service that is paid for, that we can claim for, it must meet the requirements of promising, supported, or well-supported as defined by HHS. So for those of you who work in the child welfare system, historically, you know that we have clearinghouses like Blueprints and the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse that rate and tell us if it's a promising practice, a supported practice, or well-supported when we start talking about evidence-based services. The feds have gone and created their own prevention clearinghouse, and they have to approve and slot these services as either promising, supported, or well-supported. By 2023, the state of Florida, to get paid, to be able to claim and draw money down, we have to have 50% of our expenditures reimbursed for well-supported practices. So that's a high bar, and we're aiming for it. So that, you can go to the next slide. This is a very busy slide because it is the most difficult part of this whole federal state partnership in this area. Like I said earlier, Florida has historically operated under a Title IV-E waiver. We were basically given a block grant from the federal government and said, create a child welfare system that you see fit for Florida. And we did that for almost 12 years. And we learned a lot of lessons. We sent a lot of good best practices back up to DC, and in fact informed a lot of how the FFPSA was drafted with the way Florida's demonstration waiver operated. However, while we were under the 4E waiver, we did not have to claim what was called candidacy, meaning we didn't have to say, identify a child and say, this child meets the definition of candidacy, and therefore we claim for this child under 4E. It was just a block grant. So we were able to pay for prevention services prior to the passage of this, and we were also didn't have to claim candidacy. All other states who did traditional 4E drawdown from the federal government still had to identify and claim candidates. So back in 2018, we had to recreate our candidacy program, which we had had prior to the waiver, but then it went away because we didn't need it. But then the feds brought back candidacy. And what candidacy means is that we get to define who we feel is at risk of being removed from their home. I don't want to read through this definition because the real important part is on the next slide.
And while we're going to say, I'm just going to edit Tyler, if I can interrupt. With my colleagues around the state, this is the most, I would say, controversial. I don't know if that's the best word, but this is the issue of the most discussion.
Yes.
Because in the past, not having to declare candidacy, the impact of this is that now if a children's trust participates in some of the things Tyler might talk about here in the next few slides, when you require a kid to be in candidacy, then they're then tracked and sent fins, and I don't think everyone is yet sold that we want to do that for kids in prevention, because they have other unintended consequences of over monitoring and some of the other issues that may inadvertently lead to inequities that we don't want to see in the system. So this really is right now the most, I would say, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but that's the word I'm going to use of this, the discussions up to this point. I'm sorry, Tyler, go ahead.
That's quite all right, Colin. And you're completely right. It is the most, I think, talked about and largest sticking point in this new regime of payment, because it really involves the community in identifying children who could possibly enter foster care, and that could have a lot of unintended consequences. So in the candidacy definition, we have identified populations that we deem Title IV-E prevention services could be used for. And number 12 and 13, we have said parents or caregivers who contact the department or community stakeholders requesting assistance to maintain their family. So historically, we have called this Parent Needs Assistance, or P&A. People can call the hotline, groups can call the hotline for families, and if and when we have services we can offer to them voluntarily, we have. But now we claim that under candidacy, and those people can potentially get drawdown for Title IV-E to help leverage some federal money. And then 13 is where the biggest discussion is that Colin was just talking about, and that is children who are assessed by the community as having the identified family, parental, or individual circumstances or characteristics defined in Florida's candidacy definition. So what we're saying there is, if you, the Children's Trust of Alachua County, deem a child a candidate for foster care, you could identify that child, and through whatever created process we make, you could give us a prevention plan for that child, and then we as the department could say, yes, this meets our candidacy definition. You can claim through us for some of the evidence-based services that you are paying for that child. And therein lies the rub. You have to have a paper trail from that child to the state so that, one, we can claim, and two, we can then monitor fidelity to the evidence-based program. So that's where the question is going to come in. And we are working right now. We have just kicked off, FFPSA has had a steering committee at the state level for the last 2 years. And we have just created a subcommittee called the FFPSA Community Prevention Subcommittee. I am chairing that committee, and we are going to be working on things like eligibility of candidacy and claiming. We're going to be working on innovation. We're going to be working on relationship and capacity building for community networks. And those are the types of things that we need to answer and have standards put in place for, so that this kind of question, who gets claimed, how they're claimed, is as unburdensome as possible on the families for one, and on the community providers who are already providing these services as a second, if we really want to fully leverage these funds. Next slide, please. And here's where it gets complicated. What must be in place for us, the state, to claim for a Title IV-E candidate? We have to have a federally approved Title IV-E state prevention plan, which we are working on. It has not been accepted yet, but it will be presented and hopefully accepted shortly, imminently. The child must have been assessed to be at imminent risk of foster care, which is that candidacy definition. So that's either going to be done by the hotline and investigation, hotline pushing that child's family to ESS, which is our economic self-sufficiency arm, and them determining, hey, this child is a candidate, we can help pay for some of these services, or by a community or a county or municipality saying, we think this child is a candidate. So once you have those two, then the child must have a prevention plan, and that's that piece of paper. So we're going to say this child has a plan to receive services that could be paid for by federal dollars, and one of those services in that plan must be an evidence-based program, which we'll talk about here shortly. Not only must it be evidence-based, but it must also be evidence-based on the ACF clearinghouse, that new federal clearinghouse, not attached to any of the old clearinghouses. And then that EBP must be funded through general revenue to get match claiming. This is another difficult area. We don't know how we're going to clear this hurdle yet. General revenue funds, do they mean general revenue from county taxes? Do they mean general revenue from municipal? Or do they mean general revenue as from the state legislature? That's a question that we need to have clarified, so we know exactly what they mean by general revenue. And then, like I said earlier, 50% of all of those EBPs must be well supported, and then we must monitor them for fidelity. So it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to claim on these, but we're hoping to make it as streamlined as possible, that we can actually leverage these dollars for community, basically enhancement. We hope that some groups will begin to use these federal dollars and then use the dollars saved from their special taxing districts or their private philanthropy and use those for other less cumbersome programs that they would have to claim for. So next slide, please. Another very busy slide, but this is very busy stuff. The claiming and linkages to fidelity need to be in place for them to allow drawdown. So we would put it through our, what we know as results-oriented accountability, cycle of accountability, and then the fidelity monitoring. And those yellow boxes you see there, those currently are the 9 evidence-based programs that are in our state plan that we're saying they are well supported. These are well supported on the ACF Clearinghouse. These are the types of programs we are currently looking to pay for in communities when we get this process set up. And those are motivational interviewing, Healthy Family Florida, multisystemic therapy, home builders, functional family therapy, parent-child interaction therapy, also known as PSIT, brief strategic family therapy, nurse-family partnership, and parent as teachers. So all 9 of those programs are currently on the clearinghouse. They all 9 are considered well-supported by evidence, and we are looking to create fidelity monitoring around all of those so that we can begin to potentially claim for them in our communities. Next slide. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Before you go, so question. A number of those require certification that is incredibly costly at the provider level. When you say pay for, do the funds allow for ongoing training, supervision? I know at least 2 of these require a very, very lengthy certification process, including supervision of the practice while this person is training. And a lot of places have had a huge challenge implementing those simply because nobody is supporting the training time, the supervision time, and the fact that while you're learning them, you're not going to be as productive as you are normally, and so you're not going to be able to be funded by billable service hours the way you normally are. So sorry, Steve.
I wish Ginger were still able to answer that question. She's our policy and practice guru. I do know there are admin claiming allowed, and I believe training is part of that, but I do not want to tell you that 100%. I will ask Ginger and get an answer to you guys, a full answer about what is actually paid for. I know the service itself is paid for in match, but I believe some of the admin costs include training, but I will get you a 100% answer on that, okay?
I can say multi-systemic therapy, back when we looked at it last, probably 8 or so years ago, it was like $20,000 a year. To get somebody certified in parent-child interaction training is about $7,000 to $8,000 for a person.
Wow.
And so if you have any turnover, and then that person becomes incredibly marketable.
Right.
And so in a constant needing to recruit and retrain because those folks are very, very marketable. Or they go into private practice with that credential, and there you are.
Can you outsource
group.
that function? Can you outsource that function if they go into private practice and hire them?
Not for what they want to make.
Right.
The reason they did that is because they couldn't pay them enough.
Right.
Ken, you and I had this conversation.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on the conversation. Yeah.
So I will get you guys an answer on what is actually funded via the match, and maybe some of it's training. I don't know that all of it's training. I don't know what that breakdown is, but I'll ask the policy folks about that. Sometimes the strategic planning guy. So my hope is that as we move forward in the next 2 to 3 years, we start creating better relationships with our municipalities, our counties, our independent taxing districts, to start creating streamlined efforts to leverage and claim these 4E dollars. Right now it's cumbersome, and we want to make it as uncumbersome as possible. And we also, to your point, want to make sure that the funding streams that are created are sustainable, that people just don't start this, create these large groups, and then within 6 or 9 months they fall away because there's no sustainability to it because of training and turnover and things of that nature. So that's going to be part of the FFPSA community prevention subcommittee, what we're going to be looking at. How do we maintain those relationships and that kind of sustainability in the communities? Because when we really view the state of Florida's role in FFPSA prevention, particularly community prevention, as more of capacity building, relationships, and streamline administration. We want to make sure that the communities are still in control of their networks. We want to make sure that they're able to get as much money, revenue max, as possible from the federal government in any way that it's available. And then we also want to make sure that we're helping build capacity. So That is the big change on the horizon for federal claiming, particularly around prevention services. And I think Stephen's going to talk more about local impact other than state impact.
You want me to click for you?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you, Tyler. I am Steve Kenny-Tucker, I'm the CEO of Partnership for Family, so you can understand me through the math. To go to the next slide. If you are unfamiliar with community-based care, back in the early 2000s, the state of Florida with Governor Bush decided that it was time to privatize the piece of child welfare that begins after DCF's involvement. So after a call to the hotline, if there's going to be involvement with the family, the case is handed over to us. So if the child is removed, we pick it up from the point of the shelter hearing or a couple of days thereafter. We provide all the services, we're responsible for placement, responsible for the case plan, going to court, everything that comes from that. Partnership for Strong Families covers 2 judicial circuits. So we have the 8th Circuit and the 3rd Circuit. So on the map that you have there, I tried to put a little circle around Circuit 3 and Circuit 8. You can see we go all the way from Madison and Taylor County over to Baker, down to Alachua and across to the Gulf of Mexico, 13 counties. We have a huge geographic area. Many of our counties, as you can see, are rural, and we have what we call service deserts in some of those counties where we don't have the services to really need to provide for families. Go next. So I just pulled a couple of really small pieces out of the statute to show you that what we're responsible for. 409.986 and 409.988 are the main statutes that set out the responsibilities of a lead agency. So care is one of the things we are required to do, and that includes prevention, diversion, and related services. Related services is the stuff that I talked about in terms of after a child has been removed by DCF, and we pick up all those pieces. Prevention and diversion are the main things we want to talk about with you today, but I did just want to kind of give you an overview of everything that we are responsible for. If you go to the next slide. So under 409.986, children are to be protected from abuse and neglect, obviously. They're to be maintained safely in their homes if we can do that. So as Tyler showed you, the safe, unsafe children, if we can keep them safely in a home with a safety plan, we are to do that. That's the requirement of the state. You have to give reasonable efforts, meaning you should not be taking kids just because they're unsafe. If there's something you can do in that home to keep them safe while you work with the family, we're required to do that. But to have enhanced capacity to provide for the children's needs, receive services to meet their educational, physical, and mental health needs, and develop capacity for independent living. So if the child stays in our system until they turn 18, then we're responsible not only to get them to be able to be responsible adults, but they can elect to stay in foster care after 18, now up to age 22. We were responsible for them as well. Go to the next slide. I just put a quick kind of graphic here of what our system looks like. Our main funding source obviously is DCF. The money comes to us, PSF, and then we have subcontracted case management agencies. For adoptions, we have that in-house. So when a case goal changes from unification or permanent guardianship to adoption, we take the case with our case management agencies and get the case finalized to adoption. We have offices in Gainesville, Lake City for that. Camelot does our frontline case management services in Gainesville. Devereaux does it in Lake City and Trenton, and then Camelot also has a second contract in Live Oak and Stark. And then for our independent living and extended foster care, we contract with CDF here in Gainesville. Go to the next slide. So I wanted to give you just some numbers of the number of children that we are responsible for under supervision in all 13 counties, and this was a couple of weeks ago. We have 484 children in home, meaning that either they were not removed and we're working with those families because they're unsafe, or they're safe and high risk. There's 484 of those. We have 870 children who are out of home. One of the things that we do really well in this state is finding relatives and non-relatives to place children with, as opposed to licensed foster care. We usually run about 65% of our kids are not in a licensed setting. That's thanks to Nia, who works for you now. So she's done a really good job, did that when she was working with us. And so that gives us a total of 1,354 children that we're responsible for as of a couple of weeks ago. So if you look just at Alachua County, if you go to the next slide, you can see I have 188 children in home, 292 out of home, for a total of 480 children that we are working with in Alachua County. at this time in terms of that, related care services, not the prevention and diversion, it's just the children we have. So, next slide. Where does our money come from? And this is why Colin is talking to you about this and why Tyler's telling you FFPSA is going to change the dynamics of how we do this. It goes into effect October 1st of this year. We're generally funded by a grant of general revenue. We also get federal money. We get some administrative costs. Our contract is a 5-year contract with DCF. It runs through 2024. So in terms of diversion and prevention, which is what we wanted to come talk to you about, we have 5 resource centers, 3 of them in Gainesville. Many of you are very familiar with the Gainesville Resource Centers, the Library Partnership, which started in 2009. The Southwest Advocacy Group, or SWAG, in 2012. Cone Park in 2013. SWAG, as you know, Christy Goldwire was our director until she was hired away. Did a good job there as well. The Tri-County Resource Center opened in 2015, and we just opened a resource center in Lake City. We wanted to open one there for several years. We were able to get a federal grant that I'll talk to you about in just a minute to be able to open that resource center. You can go to the next. So in selecting resource centers, we look for the areas where the community is historically underserved. We look at the high maltreatment rates, just like when Dr. Hart and Sheriff Darnell looked at the SWAG area. It became very clear that's where we needed to put a resource center. Same with the Library Partnership, the 32609 zip code has had a high maltreatment rate. So we locate the resource centers in those areas. With our grant that we have through the Children's Trust now, the Human, Social, and Emotional Development Program, we're working with 6 carefully selected early childhood learning centers to work with those families to provide support services, and obviously we appreciate your funding for that. So, in working with the resource centers, we look at the 5 protective factors: the concrete support, the social connections, the parenting and child development, the nurturing and attachment, and the parental resilience. And you can see for calendar year 2020, we had 20,654 services that we provided. 72% of those were in the concrete support, the food pantries, the clothing closets, the hygiene products. Clearly that we were impacted by COVID. Much need for people to come in for those types of services during the COVID time. We built you can see how things break down in terms of the services we provide. Go to the next slide. So why do we do this? You can see from this chart, these are the maltreatment, maltreatment rates over the years in the various areas where the Gainesville centers are. You can see how they've come down. So we know this, by putting these services, making them available to the families in these areas, that we reduce child abuse and neglect. We reduce the number of calls to the hotline that turn into verified reports. So we know this works. We want to be able to continue to do it after FFPSA. You go to the next slide. So in 2020, as you saw, we had 20,442 visits to our resource centers in Alachua County. 25% were direct services for children 0 to 17, and 34% were for parents or caregivers between the ages of 18 and 45. We provided 20,000 concrete supports, included 3,000 lunches and family-style meals, and then 82 of our SPV programs for participants, 50% of them improved one or more caregiver protective capacities in 2 or more areas. So we know that that program is working as well. You go to the next slide. I mentioned the federal grant. We got a 5-year federal grant that will help us, one, run the resource center in Lake City, because we don't get funds to do that from DCF directly. So it's going to fund that, but it's going to study the Gainesville resource centers as the baseline and then compare what happens in Lake City. So you can look at the outcome tools that are here, the Strengthening Families Assessment Tool and the Community-Based Program, the Collaboration Assessment Tool for process, and then the Family Resources Scale, the Perceived Stress Scale, the Strengths and Difficulty Survey, and the Protective Factors Survey. Those are the tools that are going to be used to evaluate the federal centers. We are not getting money to run our Gainesville centers. We are getting money from the federal government to study our Gainesville centers so we can compare them to the Lake City Center to show that this model works and show what prevention really looks like. So the next slide, I wanted to show you what we do spend on our resource centers in Alachua County. So for the Library Partnership, the total is $167,000 a year, which includes our staff And then we actually pay rent to the library. For Cohen Park, same thing, $133,000 for staff and overhead, we pay $12,000 a year in rent. For swag, we only pay $100 a month, or $100 a year rent, because the county gives us access to that building for $100, and we're very grateful for that, obviously. So the total amount comes out to $375,820 a year. The reason we're concerned about this is because what Tyler showed you, he showed you number one of the 8 things that are coming down from FFPSA. One of the main changes is the placement array. So where do we put our kids when they come into care? If we can't put them with a relative or a non-relative and they have to go into licensed care, we have to pay for that. Our concern is that we are not going to be able to meet all of those candidacy definitions for the kids in group care, as he mentioned, and we're going to have to take the funds that we are using now for our resource centers and shift them over to be able to pay for the kids that we know are going to be coming into care. So we don't want to stop doing resource centers, clearly. We don't think that's a good idea. It is the upfront prevention. It is that face-to-face contact. In terms of what Tyler was saying, with the community contacts, the ability to have a child come in and meet that candidacy definition, we may be able to do that at the resource centers, but we are going to have to continue to keep the doors open to be able to do that going forward. So it's the balance between the other requirements of FFPSA versus the loss of our 40 flexibility and prevention here. That is what we wanted to come and make you aware of. And the last slide I wanted to put in, because the last one is other things. I'm sure Colin talked to you about the other children's services councils around the state and the things that they fund. One of the things that we may be coming to talk about is attorneys for children in dependency and delinquency cases. Right now, the attorneys are appointed, as I'm sure to tell you, we have very few local attorneys that are available to do this. The funding usually, I believe, still comes through the Guardian Ad Litem program, and it just gets spent very quickly during the year. I am one of those who believes that every child in the dependency system should have an attorney. Being an attorney, having worked in the dependency system for years, I just think kids should have those advocates. Guardian Ad Litem, their job is to advocate for best interest. They are not an attorney for the child. I think children need attorneys in this system. In many places in the country, that is what happens. There's a bill right now in the Senate to essentially give a child an attorney in every case as it goes through. It may not make it because there's not a House companion bill, but it's clear that there's a need for that. We could do this because it is being done in other parts of the state. We may be coming to you to ask for that, to be able to provide social workers and other people to assist those families. The other evidence-based programs you heard about, motivational interviewing, trust-based relational intervention. We gave money tonight for a matching grant for Genesis, that Connie's here, and Antoine, who used to work for us. We've been trying to be able to fund that kind of service because it's a wonderful thing for our families. So we may be coming to ask you for those kind of things. That's what I came to say. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions?
Thank you.
A lot of that went over my head, I apologize.
Sure.
You know, not, yours is much clearer than the presentation about the candidacy and what else. I think that I need a little bit more coaching up on that, to understand.
I never thought I would say yay for block grants for the federal. In this case, the block grant made a lot of sense. And it's a shame that they've gone to this, because really what they're saying is the message they're sending, to put it simply, more simply than this way, is they have moved away from primary prevention, from really dealing with not having any kids be at risk anymore by dealing with placement at risk, and moving to what's called tertiary prevention, which is once they're already sort of messed up, let's try and mitigate what's coming. Because Lord knows the front end is cheaper, but we don't want to fund it. I mean, that's basically what you're seeing.
And so the purpose of this was 3. One is, do we want to participate in the new system? Because if we participate in the new system, we may, and depending on what candidacy means, and you don't have to understand it to know that if it's not what we want, then it could have some unintended consequences. But participating means that our funds can be used as a drawdown federal dollars to expand what's done here. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I wanted to make sure you're all aware of the potential impact to the resource centers. Throughout the state, Children's Councils fund resource centers. This was, or counties. This was the only place that I've seen where it was coming through the CBC. When I figured that out before I even, knew whether it was even a children's trust passed, I thought that was interesting. But, if they can still fund it, I would say still do it, because we have plenty of needs. But if that's something that, this totally flips upside down, that may be something, as we're looking at other things that we look at with this federal money, this one-time money coming down, that's important to our community, we may want to take a look at that. And the third thing is there are some things we can do. I asked Stephen specifically to put the attorney program in his presentation, because in, both Palm Beach and Broward, where Palm Beach focuses mainly just on 0 to 5 and Broward, solely on prevention, that's really an intervention strategy, but they did it because, one, the need, and two, the results were so good as far as moving the kids into permanency. It made such a huge difference that they continue to do it, and that is something that, assuming that, proper budget authorities and 10 different things, that is also eligible for a federal drawdown, which both of our colleagues in Broward County and Palm Beach get. I think right now the attorney that does it is the Gator or something or other. Stephen, who is it, the Gator?
We had Gator Teen Child, but that's evolving, and I'm not sure they're gonna be representation in the future.
So the big fight in the legislature, just so you know, is that one senator has sponsored a bill that would make this state policy. So if that's the case, we wouldn't need to fund it. Chances of it passing are probably 0, because the Guardian Ad Litem program that sees this as a potential competitor is not really supportive of this program. So, at least that's my spin. So I might have just gotten myself in trouble, but that's the way I see it right now. And so that is why some of the CSCs have jumped in and taken a look at that service, because it has made such a big difference. It's relatively small, so to speak. So those were the 3 reasons. As we're looking towards our budget and interacting with other systems and where do we fit, I thought, that was important.
Yeah, so I'm in favor of looking at what Broward and Palm Beach are doing, and if we can leverage that type of model, looking at that, because it's something, I think that's a really good model.
I'm certainly supportive of doing anything that keeps the family resource centers operating. And they have been, aside from the fact that so much of it has been ground up in terms of how you meet the needs, how you serve the family, it would be a phenomenal loss to this community to not have those. So whichever way, I don't know if participating, Steve, Colin, you might know, is the claiming going to be for the direct services and or administrative claiming as well?
Some administrative, Tyler was saying, you've got to be able to do that assessment of the child, and you have somebody to.
Right, but you can then go ahead and claim the non-child time as an administrative claim up to
Yeah.
That may help pay for some of that stuff too.
Then the staffing, who's gonna do the follow-up?
Right, yeah, no, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Now, Ken, you need to use your relation with the library board. Work on the rest.
You know Jenny, right?
Oh, yeah, I know she was, good job. So, any other comments? We look forward to working with you in the future.
Appreciate it.
The next item would be, general public comments for anybody who would like to make a comment about what they heard. Just a comment, something that they would like to express. This is the perfect time to do so. If you're listening or watching the meeting through the webinar format, please use the raise your hand function. Simply click on the participants icon, Zoom tool, or click the raise your hand button on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Those of you viewing the meeting through the webinar may also comment via that chat function. And if you're watching via YouTube or listening on the phone and would like to comment, please call Call-in number 1-346-248-7799, and use ID 828-8899, 1588, and press star 9. All that can be viewed, monitor as we speak. Any comments? Thank you, actually, appreciate it. Okay, and now, we can see that a number of the members of this board were highlighted in the information thing. I think we had, Judge Bullard swearing in Clovis, and Dr. Hart being recognized for the wonderful things that she's done in her, I think 40 years of working with children, in children's colleges. And also, Tina Certain was also in there, as well as a woman's distinction, I believe. So, lots of information for everybody to read. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that, and again, Kristen did a great job as well. The next regular meeting will be May the 10th here, and are there any of the members who would like to make a comment about what they've heard, or okay, again, it's great to see everybody here, and I look forward to seeing everybody here on May the 10th. Until then, we are adjourned for the evening.